Nós temos aqui nesta sessão os contributos dois contributos internacionais que incidem sobre duas das principais dimensões do projeto Igualdade, Género nas empresas. Por um lado temos a promoção e disseminação de instrumentos destinados a apoiar a igualdade de género nas organizações, e vamos ter aqui connosco a experiência de uma agência das Nações Unidas, a Organização Internacional do Trabalho, e mais particularmente o seu Centro Internacional de Formação. E depois, em segundo lugar, teremos as boas práticas implementadas de uma forma proativa por uma empresa norueguesa, a Simula Research Laboratory, com vista à igualdade de género, refletida na cultura da organização e no seu modelo organizacional, presumo. Sorry, you don't have translation, I will tell you. Esta empresa recebeu o Gender Equality Award, como já foi referido, recebeu em 2013, e esse prémio é atribuído pelo Ministério de Educação e Investigação da Noruega. Portanto, eu passo a dar a palavra à Benedetta Magri, mas em primeiro lugar só queria dizer que a Benedetta é gestora, manager da Academia de Género da OIT, é responsável sénior por programas, normas internacionais de trabalho, direitos de trabalho e igualdade de género no Centro Internacional de Formação da OIT. Trabalha há 20 anos nesse centro, enquanto perita na área da formação e capacitação para a igualdade de género no mundo do trabalho. Tem coordenado muitos projetos bastante vastos destinados a desenvolver competências, tanto no plano internacional quanto no plano nacional em países da União Europeia. Foi autora de toolkits de materiais de formação sobre este tema. Tem uma experiência particular na área do mainstreaming de género, na área das auditorias participativas de género, e é sobre isso que ela irá apresentar a sua comunicação. Também em matéria de igualdade e não discriminação nos locais de trabalho. E, portanto, Benedetta, you have the floor. Thank you.
So I have about 20 minutes. I have about 20 minutes. Will you tell me when it's 15 minutes? Will you just let me know? So good morning, everyone, and apologies for my English. I can understand a little bit of Portuguese, but speaking it far too much. As it was already said, I am here from the International Training Center of the ILO. The ILO is a United Nations agency, and it is the one that is specifically dedicated to the world of work. And it has a number of offices throughout the world, including one here in Portugal, in Lisbon. We are lucky enough to have a colleague from the ILO Lisbon office here with us, and which is particularly active also in the field of gender equality. The reason why I am here from the training center of the ILO is that as a training center, so as the training arm of the organization, we have a program that has been working in capacity building and training, awareness raising on gender equality and non-discrimination for about 20 years now. So we have accumulated quite a broad experience exactly in the area of, let's say, working for transforming individuals and institutions towards workplaces that are more diverse, that are more equitable, and basically where productivity and justice go together. So I'd just like Sarah Falcao, Professor Falcao, has asked me to give you a brief overview of what we do at the International Training Center of the ILO, which is in Turin, Italy. We have a campus where we train about 5,000 people every year coming to see us, or we go to basically all the countries that are member states of the ILO, so 183 countries in the world. So we are ready to go. We do not go exactly. And we also have a number of online training courses. And all this is in the area of the core mandate of the organization, meaning fundamental rights, rights at work, meaning employment policies, meaning policies to look after workers when they're not able to work, so social protection policies, and what is really, let's say, the core mandate of the organization, whatever is related to social dialogue, dialogue between the social partners that are our main, let's say, constituency, that is employers' organizations, trade unions, and governments, mostly government in terms of Ministry of Labor, of course. So we have this quite large training program. Amongst them, I work in the department that is training on gender equality, non-discrimination, and international labor standards. Why are these two together? Because since its establishment in 1919, so it's going to be 100 years of life of the institution, one of the very first concerns of the constituents of the ILO was the protection of women at work. So one of the very first conventions that was like international labor norms, standards that was adopted by the International Labor Conference was on maternity protection. And this instrument has been guiding the different countries in developing their own maternity legislation. So we can say that the ILO provides the guidelines at international level on the fundamental rights for women and men at work. And we have a very, very good number of instruments that specifically looked at equality, because equality and non-discrimination is considered a core value, a sine qua non in any situation, in any context, in any country, in any company, public sector, even where you do not have a formal sector. Non-discrimination is considered a fundamental human right that cannot be, let's say, negotiated. So any country that is part of the UN and that is part of the ILO has to respect this principle. It's not a matter of discussion. Of course, there is a lot of discussion when it comes from going from the principle to which we all, of course, agree, to the practice in the workplace. How does that happen in the workplace? And this is why I think a project like the one that is concluding today, but I hope it will continue, this is just a moment in the, I hope, a very long life of a process that has just started. These type of projects are extremely important and extremely interesting, not only for those who live in the companies, but also for those who work at a more international level like us, to learn how you actually do it in practice. How can you do it in a way that is beneficial not only for workers, but for the company itself, for its profitability, for its working environment. So thank you for having invited us, and thank you also for having been involved, let's say, throughout the project life. I was asked to talk a little bit about, I was asked to talk a little bit about the participatory gender audit. I'll try to do this because this is one of the tools that has been devised by the International Labor Organization exactly to try and translate that principle of equality and non-discrimination from the very high level of law and principles and values to the everyday practice of people at work. Here I just have, let's say, a little list that shows that actually the participant gender audit training is one of the many activities that we have. So this year, for instance, our training calendar covers many other topics that are always related to equality and non-discrimination in the world of work. we tend to look at non-discrimination in a broader sense, meaning that, of course, diversities and inequality between women and men is a very, very important element of social justice. However, it is more and more clear that there are many different types of inequalities, and that we as individuals are not just women and men. We are women and men from certain social groups, from certain countries, with certain cultures, with certain different abilities. And this is what we bring when we enter into the workplace. We do not just bring our being women and men, with the basic understanding that the fact of being women and men is a fundamental, let's say, division because of obvious reasons related to the reproductive roles and then what happens after that in terms of what society is expecting from us because of our reproductive roles. So we look at non-discrimination in a broader sense, trying to really build the tools to help, first of all, governments, because we work very much at policy level in terms of training for public sector policymakers, but also those who work more at enterprise, at company level, at institution level, tools to manage this diversity and make sure that the diversity of backgrounds, the diversity of expectations, the diversity of abilities of people is brought to the benefit of the institution rather than becoming a possible source of inequality, of injustice, and eventually of conflict or even of an inefficiency in the long term. So this is a little bit the list of courses. I will focus on the participatory gender audit, what we call the PGA, because this has been, I understand, a little bit the inspiration of the work that has been done in the project Break-Even. And I was really delighted when I was listening to the experience to hear that actually it has been truly done and adapted, which is exactly what the whole point about the participatory gender audit is about. It is not like a protocol that you have to apply, but it is a series of ideas and tools and an approach that each institution should be able to build and apply to its own context. So what is the participatory gender audit? It's one of those methodologies that belong to the category of social audits. So the word audit itself is a little bit misleading because in reality we are not just checking for compliance, but basically, as it happens with financial audits, for instance, but we are trying to see what the gap between the principle of equality and the reality is and understand how to get there in a way that is palatable and acceptable and makes happy those who work in the institution. So it really aims at helping organizations improving their performance, full stop, because it will improve gender equality, non-discrimination, and eventually staff well-being. So motivation and, let's say, prevention of conflicts. So what does it give you? It gives you, as a result, a map, what we call a gender and diversity map. It was born as, at the beginning of the year 2000 as a pure gender audit, really focusing only on diversities between women and men. And as we have been using it over all these years, we have realized we really have to broaden the scope and enter into other types of diversities. So recently we have been using it in Europe in a number of institutions, adapting it and really looking at other elements of diversity. So what it gives you is two main elements. The first one is what is good in the workplace, what works, what is the potential of staff, what is the potential of good practice that can be spread. We use an approach that we call positive deviance, Meaning if you look at behaviors that are slightly different from others, but actually they are better than others, being always adhering to a norm doesn't necessarily bring innovation, doesn't necessarily bring new ideas. In today's world, I think that the First Secretary said it very well at the beginning of this conference, saying we are not in a world of work, we are not in an economic environment we can afford not to be innovative. We need to look for new ideas. So this is one of the tools that can be used. So we look at good practice also from that perspective. And of course, we also look at causes of inequality. We also know the numbers. This morning, the important speakers that spoke before me came very clearly out with quite, let's say, disappointing numbers. So we are still a bit behind in terms of representation, in terms of pay gap and all this. So we want to know why this happens. Okay, we'll get the data, get the quantity, but let's look at the qualitative aspect that makes things as they are. And let's look at it trying to get out of the box ourselves. But I'll try and explain it later. So this is the process. The first step is the people talking, meaning it's aimed to be a very participatory process. It aims to be, it is not an auditor going there and knowing it all and knowing what you should do, but it is the people who themselves run the company or the institution, the top management, the middle management, those who are on the line, who really know how things work. So it's from them that we want to hear and know. But what do? We help them put a different type of glasses on. Or even we help them take off their glasses and broaden their view and listens to others. And then get to an understanding, a common understanding of what are the inequality issues in this organization. How do people get together? How do people, understand each other's role as women and men, not only as workers? Because we know very well that we bring ourselves nice costumes in the world of work. But actually, behind this costume, there's someone who's ironed it. There's someone who's washed my floor. Maybe myself, maybe someone else. This someone very often will be a woman. I would say 90% of the time will be a woman. So it is true that we can bring, and when we're talking about work, we talk about work, but actually we are bringing something else in that is hidden. And it is our hidden assumptions about who other people are and what they do. These hidden assumptions, what we call in technical terms gender bias or biases, are actually having an influence in the way we work. And this is not only true for gender, it's true also for ability. It's true for race. So how much does this unconscious aspect influence? This is what we're going to look in the gender audit, but we do it together, and we can only do it by discussing. So it's quite it's a process that requires a bit of patience, requires a bit of humbleness on everyone's side, but that brings, in my experience, very good results, because it helps untie knots. It helps loosen certain tensions that may be between me and my colleague, because she's always going out early when it's the moment to have the important meeting, or because he's always shouting at me because he doesn't understand. These kind of everyday problems can be resolved with very nice rules, but in reality, if there isn't a basic understanding, we need to talk to each other, also with an understanding of diversities, it is very, very difficult for us to be able to change. So, This morning, Sara Falcao already explained a little bit the type of methods, and I think that those companies who have been through the process probably have seen some of the methodologies, the questionnaires, the interviews, and I don't know whether you had also focus groups, because basically there are three main tools that I use: questionnaires, interviews, and focus group. But what is important is the approach. Is the idea that everyone in that room, of course, not always, but in that room where we are discussing, everyone has a voice and everyone's voice counts. Let's say there are certain basic assumptions that, let's say, we have in this approach. The first assumption is that there is a linkage between discrimination, inequality, poor performance, and stereotypes, meaning that what is called the self-avering stereotype. A lot of research has proved that if you, for instance, they do it a lot with, they've done some proofs on girls and boys. If you tell girls that they're going to do a very difficult mathematical assignment, and this is really hard, and this is something very technical, they will do less well than if you give them exactly the same assignment, calling it a drawing assignment or an art assignment, if it's let's say it's geometry. So there is now a very clear understanding that if you start giving a cast to someone, that person will behave as is or she is expected to behave. This has obviously then a repercussion in performance. So there is a linkage between the fact of being treated in a way that is, let's say, maybe not less recognizing status, behaving as you are expected to behave, and poor performance. And this is a vicious circle, because the poorer you perform, the worse you're going to be perceived, the worse you're going to be treated, and the more and the less, let's say, you are giving the best of your talent. This is very true, and this is very proved in, let's say, the broader labor market. Labor economics is very clear in showing that what is called occupational segregation, meaning women being concentrated in certain occupation rather than others, is the result of this type of mechanism, a vicious circle of, let's say, stereotypes, or I don't want to call it even negative, of how women and men are expected to behave. But this also happens in workplaces, and you really can see it when you enter into a company and you start having discussion about how things are happening. It takes a while, though. The second assumption is that whenever there are inequalities, so here we're talking about gender inequalities, it is not a matter of one person being bad or being... Maybe sometimes we do have people being bad and being sexist. They don't necessarily are all men. They can also be women. Women and men can be as sexist as equally. But what is important is that in reality, these hidden assumptions get reflected in all the structures of institutions. So you really have to be able to understand and to start positive change in a sustainable way, you need to look at all these other different elements that can go from the law, from the more formal aspects, to the more informal aspects. I think that already this morning this was said, so I can possibly skip it, because Sarah already made a list of what is then in reality. And that's why people get so surprised when we start asking, can I see your budgets, can I see your papers? And they say, but what is it? I gave you all the HR stuff. It's not just that, it's to look in a broader sense. The other important assumption is that sustainable change, because when we're talking about improving diversity in a company or improving equality in an institution, we are talking about change because there is a status quo we don't like and we want to get somewhere where there is something different and we want this change to be better. So there are three fundamental elements. The first one is, of course, that the top-level commitment, but that's certainly not enough. I've just heard of, there are certain initiatives like He for She. You may have heard of He for She campaign. It's a very nice initiative where the CEOs of top companies are telling their staff they have to be committed to gender equality. And then they have quota systems. They are doing this affirmative action for women. That part by itself can even be dangerous if you don't also work at other levels where people are actually reflecting what are my understanding, what is my understanding about gender equality, what is my understanding about disability. Am I biased? If I have to pose the question to myself, I can say yes, because we are all biased. It's part of the way we think. So if you don't go through that process of, let's say, self-awareness, change may come, but it will also very quickly go away. So it's a matter of assessing yourself in a qualitative way. Another assumption is that the change that you can have in gender and diversity benefits individual working, can benefit organization, and in the long term, it can benefit society. That is also, let's say, why the ILO specifically ventured into a field that is not just on policy advice, but it's a very, very practical type of action at organizational level. And these are the kind of, let's say, benefits that you can see in organizations that have entered into a gender audit. And I'm just talking about the gender audit as the first step of a process that leads to an action plan. The first point is that today is not a matter of increasing diversity, because we are in a globalized world where diversity is a status quo. We are more and more in a world of work where there are more and more people coming from outside Europe. More and more women have entered the labor force. People with disabilities are more and more, and right enough, accessing adequate vocational training and education. So actually, and also there are in many countries, many European countries, laws that pose certain quotas, and maybe there will be more and more laws posing quotas. These are being discussed now. How can institutions make the best of this? So it's a matter of realizing that there is a potential, but this potential has to be used for the best. It's not just a matter of accepting it in a kind of more formal way. There have been a lot of, especially in the United States, talk about the positive, the bottom line of gender equality. I've always been kind of a little bit wary of these kind of things when they say, no, gender equality brings money. That is a little bit strange to say. What it is proved is that where there are companies that are good at managing equality and diversity issues, those are companies that are profitable, because those are companies and organizations that are good at managing their talent. So it's more of a matter of not proving that women are better than they bring you more money because they have some special qualities, but because we have a pool of talent that is made 50-50. So if you get the talent from that 50-50, you'll get more. Very simple equation. So I think this is where the starting point is really using the participatory gender audit as a tool to make the best of existing diversity or attracting more diversity where there is less, because it's a competitive advantage today. It can bring a competitive advantage. How does it happen? It happens, for instance, I had a case in an institution where, a multicultural institution, where you have a lot of very negative dynamics brought about by gender equality issues and nationality issues. The participatory gender audit allowed staff and management to really analyze the core elements of those conflicts and come to joint solutions. So you can really say that, for instance, if you have very different understanding of what sexual harassment means in a company, and you have some new employees maybe coming from different countries who have a completely different understanding from what other employees have, it can create a big conflict. In the long run, it can even bring litigation. But that's where you can try to prevent this, agreeing on certain common standards. So this discussion in reality is not just about theory, but it's about very practical thing. What is an acceptable behavior during a meeting when I'm sitting and I don't want to be treated like the secretary who's going to, can you please bring me coffee? So get into very, very practical discussions. Or how do we make sure that working times are family friendly for everyone? As again this morning, it's time to stop. So these are the fact of finding some common standard is also a way to increase staff engagement. And that's one of the other cases when we have been called, when staff were proving some disengagement towards the company. Companies, particularly knowledge-based companies, have their richest wealth in staff. So engaging competent staff and not letting them go is fundamental today. And we have been using the participant gender audit in order to help management understand how to improve staff engagement. And I would say in some cases we've seen the difference. I will not enter into the what we look at, because I think that my time is gone. I will just conclude with the product, and that's why I do not mention companies, because the product is a synthesis report with a series of benchmarks that gives the first step towards an action plan. With some institutions, we have gone forward with action planning and also giving support to how to implement the action plan. I would have many examples, but the important thing is that the participatory gender audit report is strictly confidential. It belongs to the institution, and it is the institution that decides what to do with it, and this is why I wasn't able to give any, let's say, example directly. But of course, there are some institutions that have been willing to post it, and there are some websites. So if there is anyone interested in looking at one example, I can provide further information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benedetta. It was very interesting to listen to you. Well, we can see this was an instrument that the project Gender Equality in Enterprises. That this was an instrument that this project relied very much upon and was inspired to build participative diagnosis, and it can be perceived as an instrument for change, and it's also very interesting, just like Professor Sara Falcão-Casaca was showing us this morning. One can see clearly how the different layers of areas where you have to intervene in order to produce that change in an organization, and everything deriving from stereotypes and discrimination, and it will end up hopefully producing improvements for the enterprise and for people happiness and well-being inside organizations. So thank you very much, and I'm going to give the floor to Marianne. Marianne Sundet, portanto, trabalha na empresa Simula Research Laboratory. Ela possui um mestrado em Filosofia pela Universidade de Oslo e, portanto, trabalha na Simula desde 2014. É diretora da área da inovação e, antes disso, na mesma empresa, foi diretora da administração. Não vou alongar-me. Eu penso que isto, como dizia há pouco, é uma experiência que pode ter muito interesse na medida em que nos traz concretamente boas práticas, de como toda esta dimensão foi incorporada na cultura da organização e também no modelo organizacional da Simula. Portanto, you have the floor, Marianne.
Thank you for the introduction. I don't speak Portuguese, so I don't know what she said. But I'm here I've not been part of the Break-Even project, but I was lucky to meet the project in Oslo last year. And I've been invited here to talk about the experiences we have made in Simula, the company I represent. We are not experts within gender equality. We are a company. We run a business, but we had some challenges and we addressed them carefully, and we have worked to improve our female proportion of the staff over a 5-year period, and we have seen some results. So I hope the experiences we have made is relevant for you, and maybe you can get some ideas to take back. So this is a picture of the CEO of Simula. His name is Aslak Tveito. When he received the Gender Equality Award from the Norwegian Minister of Education and Research. And it was a very big thing for us because, of course, it improved our self-esteem because we knew this is something we can do, and it also made our staff very proud of being part of this company that had achieved such good results. And I think the second half of the minister's quote is straight to the core of what we are doing, where he says, Simula, they prove in practice that diversity can contribute to international success and research excellence. So that's the goal we're aiming for at all. That's the main goal. We want to run the business and get the best possible results, and we think that by having a diverse culture and gender equality, that's a very important part of achieving that. So just a few words about Simula and what Simula is, so that you get the framework for before I start talking about the concrete measures that we made. So Simula, you can see from the map, we are just outside Oslo. We are a research center within ICT, and we are run like a company, but we are owned by the Norwegian state. So our 3 main focus areas is we do basic research, we do education, meaning we have master students connected to us. They get supervision from our professors. And we collaborate with universities, mainly in Norway, but also internationally, both in Europe and in the United States, for the education of doctorates, PhD degrees. And also we work on innovation, meaning we try to get businesses coming out of the research results. So we have now, currently we have 12 spin-off companies that we have established based on the research in the center. We are not a very big organization. We are around 150 employees. In addition to that, we have master students, and we have all the people that work in the spin-off companies. We are an international organization, and just, I think 3 years ago, we shifted from having, now we have more people from, not from Norway, in our organization. The funding situation, of course, we are in a very competitive business. We have to apply for funding from the same instruments that's in the rest of the Europe scene. We also we participate in the Horizon 2020 program, as well as we have funding schemes from the National Research Council, in addition to some basic funding. This is something I found at the magazine The Economist. They have this interesting infographic that is very interactive, so you can look at and compare all the different elements of the working environment for women in different countries. One reason for why I chose this is that, of course, it shows that in Norway the situation is very good for working women. The basis for these statistics is a lot of different parameters. It's ranging from the number of children in childcare to paternity leave to a female proportion of senior management levels. A lot is included. But I just wanted to show it to make a point of that in the Norwegian context, it's already quite good. So our challenge was not on this level. Our challenge was more on the scientific field level, because the specific fields of information technology that Simula operates within are traditionally has a very low representation of female. So you can see from the first figure, that's just that's a big sort of bag group of the natural sciences in general. And you can see already there that it's less than 50% of the students coming out of the universities are female. And the second point I want to make is that on a more senior level, because there you have the graduates and then you have the senior level, the number of professors within these same fields are also very low, around 10%. So that was our specific challenge. We needed to increase the number of talented, qualified professors and scientific personnel to reach the goal that we had. So we started working on this in 2009, and we had a very low representation of female candidates within our employee group. So we started with a very broad process throughout the organization. All the employees had a chance to get involved, and we had different discussion groups. But the main thing that really made a huge impact was that the board of directors, and the top management, they decided and they committed to this goal. That was that by December 2015, we were about to have 25% female proportion of the scientific staff. And there are at least two reasons why that goal was so important. One thing was that it did show the level of commitment from the top management and the board of directors, and they really wanted to see this goal being fulfilled. So one reason the goal in itself is important, but also that it came with resources that made us able to actually complete on the different measures that we devised for this. Another thing with the goal is that it's very specific. So over time, we have been very careful to monitor the development very closely, and we have discussed that with our department managers at least twice a year. So we get that feeling of everyone is involved to see how these numbers develop. So we decided that we wanted to work along two specific lines. We wanted to work with recruitment, to try to see how we can get more talented scientists to Simula, and also how we can help regional activities to support the education system and try to get more girls interested in these specific subjects. And also we wanted to do something with the working environment so that we made sure that the females we had, that they wanted to stay and to develop further, and then to be able to take on management roles. So here we have some of the numbers. You see on the side we have it's the PhD candidates, it's the postdoc level, and it's the research level, including everyone from a fresh researcher up until a senior level researcher. And the thick line in the middle in orange, that's the average. So as you can see, in 2013, when we got the award, we managed to reach our goal of 25%, because we reached 26% representation of female staff in 2013. And we have been working with this, of course, we have continued the focus, and now we are up on 28. So the new goal we are working for is we want to have 30% by 2017. One interesting thing here is, of course, if you see that dotted green line with the researcher position, in 2009 and 10, we had no one at all. So for us, that was the biggest challenge, and that is the most important challenge, to ensure that you build and grow that group of more senior female researchers. Within the first focus area, within recruitment, we had that challenge that the recruitment base for us to find these female candidates from is very limited. We have some numbers here. It's just from a department at University of Oslo that we think is relevant to compare ourselves to. It's the Department of Informatics, and you see that the numbers of the female portion here is around 20%. So in general, in the fields, we work within software engineering, communication systems, and scientific computing. So it's very specific related to those numbers. So that was a big challenge. So what we tried to do was to use the benefit that we had with our organizational model, because we are run as a limited company. So we are different from the university sector and from many other public sectors, because we have the opportunity to headhunt directly, so we can employ whoever we want. So we made the most of that possibility. So we have been using that as part of a way to reach our goals, to look for talented female candidates and try to get them to Simula. One thing I also want to mention was that when we started doing this, we were concerned that we wanted to, of course, make sure that everything we did was in compliance with the laws and regulations, the Act of Discrimination, because we didn't want to do anything that was not fair on the male proportion of our employees. So we had legal advice to ensure that. So that just was a good thing to have clarified. Among the other measures that we have actively tried to encourage, and we have a global workforce, so that for us we look internationally for the best candidates, and we try to encourage the female especially. We have, as I mentioned, with the top management commitment, we have been able to, in certain cases when we have had an opening, we had more than one top female candidate. We actually stretched all the budgets that we could, so we could apply 2 instead of 1. We have created a new position within our system, because we see that sometimes it's different for girls and boys, or women and men, how they sort of prepare themselves for the work, for a career. So we started this position, we call it the research trainee position, where we hire a master, someone that has finished their master's degree, for 1 year, and that year they can prepare to see if they are, if they think that going this academic route is the right way for them. And then the research group has the time to apply for funding for a position. And we see that has been a way for us to connect with the female candidates and also to support them in the process of going into this career. We have other initiatives as well. We have started something we call the Prepare project, and now we are really aiming for a lot younger group than what we can hire directly. But this is to prepare for the younger people coming further along, because we see that the subjects, the hard technical sciences and also the natural sciences, that the recruitment base is the female proportion of the recruitment base is low already at primary and I don't know the right word for that, but the age when they are around 15, 16 years old, when they make a decision to go further into those type of studies, or if they choose something else. So we wanted to do something to address them specifically. And what we learned was that the effect of having role models that were a bit more like themselves. So we modeled this Prepare project on something that they do at the Penn State University in the States. They have something they call the engineering ambassadors. So we stole some concepts from their program, and we started this. And what we do basically is that we hire female and male bachelor students from the subjects that are relevant for Simula, and we have them in and we provide them with training, communication training. And what happens is that we then have this collaboration with the school system in our region. So these young girls and boys, they go out to the schools, they talk to the pupils around 15, 16 years old, and they talk to them in a way that we see, this is something we learned as we have went along, that boys, they are sometimes interested in technical subjects because of the techniques. They are into that specifically. But for girls, they are much more interested if they can get a better feeling of how can I employ this into my working life later, who will benefit from this technology, how can I work with this, what type of roles can I have within society by studying this particular subject. So that's what we did. We hired these young bachelor and master students, and they worked a lot with their talks, and then they met with the students. And we hope that, we haven't seen any sort of direct results yet, but we really hope that this has a positive effect on the young pupils deciding to study subjects maybe they hadn't thought of before they met the Prepare students. Coming back to the second focus area, working environment improvements, I guess this figure is in Norwegian, but the black line is men and the red is female, and below you have the spectrum of positions within the academic structure, from being a candidate for a PhD and then all the way to the professor level. And I have read a bit about this, and it seems to me that this figure has the same look in a lot of countries. So that's not specific for Norway, that you have at the more senior level, the females seem to disappear. There's probably a lot of reasons for why they do that, but what we have decided as part of our approach to this challenge is that we need to work very specifically to develop and retain the female candidates that we already have, and also to prepare that ground, that basis for the new females that we always recruit. So specific things that we have done is that I think one thing that was had a big effect was that we tried to build a strong scientific footprint around a few selected high potential candidates. So we provided them with resources to build their own research group. They got their own PhD students, and we monitored them and gave them support and mentoring to start building a footprint. That's important also because what happens is that when they get into the competition for research funding, they are in position to hire new PhD students, and we see that women, they tend to hire more women. So that helps us with our main goals. Also, in addition to, we have different working environment, sort of flexible measurements that is helpful both for male and female staff. But the most effectful thing is the management training that we offer, because we want to prepare these employees with the potential to take on management roles later. So just in the fall, we decided to send 4 potential leaders to management training. We send them to top-profile management schools like the Business School in London and also Wharton in the States. And of these 4 candidates, 3 were women specifically. So we're trying to build a strong future for that part of Simula. So just to summarize, I want to just leave you with a few comments. It's a combination of all these different things that we think have helped us reach our goal. And it takes some time. We've been doing this now this is our 6th year. But we see that working systematically and working specifically toward a goal has helped us. We focus on these 2 areas, as mentioned. We want to recruit systematically more females, and we want to work hard to retain them and develop them professionally. We see that the effect of having female role models should not be underestimated. And we see also that monitoring this development very frequently and sharing that internally in the organization has had a big effect on getting everyone on board. And the one major thing that if I didn't have that part, I don't think it would have happened, is that you need a very strong commitment from your top management and the boards of directors. Thank you.
It was very, very interesting to hear. Está. Eu é que estava a falar para todas as direções. Parece um giroscópio. No, mas pronto. It was very interesting because from what I read, you are an enterprise, and you have the kind of management based on a model of enterprise, not university.
No.
So everybody is hired. Both researchers and management board and everybody, they are employees. So you are based, you are looking for efficiency. So it clearly appears that quality, gender equality are deeply related, linked, and everything you do in a proactive way as a major goal to improve efficiency, because you must deliver.
Yes.
And
I would also add efficiency, but also quality.
Yeah.
Because it brings to the quality of the research groups and the variety of experiences that you bring into the research groups. So that in the end is a quality issue.
Yeah. And at the same time, you're of course you have a very proactive policy in what relates to recruitment and hiring and mentoring and so on. But as regards the working conditions, you are not only focusing on gender equality, but it has an effect on gender equality, because if people are happy, they know the rules, they are happy, they care about them, and they are listened to, it has a good result because it adjusts to people's needs. So now thank you very much. Eu agora sei que nós não temos muito tempo e, portanto, vamos pegar para aí 2 perguntas, dois comentários, 2 perguntas que queiram dirigir quer às 2 oradoras que aqui estão ou que se relacionem com qualquer uma das dimensões focadas esta manhã. É o que acontece sempre, temos pouquinho tempo. Mas vamos ter outro espaço de debate esta tarde. Esperemos. Portanto, não se importam de quem quiser apresentar alguma questão, dizer quem é e a quem dirige a questão. Obrigada.
So I have 2 questions. One is for Marianne. Do you think that all this process of self-regulation at Simula, it was driven by the normative framework in Norway? So the normative framework is targeted at the publicly listed companies, but even so, do you think that it was a driver for all this work that you have made at Simula? And for Benedetta, well, It has not to do properly with your presentation, but I know that you have also carried out gender audits in companies. And do you think that our destination is to end up in a moment where the companies are adopting, are implementing the action plan, or have you been invited to support the implementation of the action plan? And if so, what kind of initiatives have you been performing in order to support them in implementing and supporting the action plan? Thank you.
I would like also to address one specific question to Simula regarding the way of encouraging young students at the secondary level to be engaged in technological courses. Can you speak a little bit more about concrete examples and practice, how you are encouraging younger generations of women to attend technological programs?
Pronto, eu acho que esgotámos as duas perguntas, não é? Que neste caso são três. Uma dirigida a Benedetta e outra dirigida a Marianne, duas dirigidas a Marianne, e portanto, pronto, eu acho que vou começar por dar a palavra à Benedetta, que só tem uma pergunta, e depois I'll give the floor to Benedetta.
So, yes, the participatory gender audit is really the start of a process, and of course, one of the things we tried to do, but we haven't succeeded yet, is to convince those organizations who embark into this process to train themselves enough to be able to continue the process by themselves. But this is an investment. So I was very impressed at the fact that you have developed the training manual for use, because I thought that was really, really important. The component of training you had parallel to the, let's say, to the auditoria. So what happens in reality is that once the report is given, we sit down with the organization. And in one case, for instance, we had 6 research institutions that were able to set up indicators and benchmarks. So it was quite useful to have this discussion among the organization themselves and decide this is the benchmark, for instance, at the level of law, because they were in 6 European member states. This was a funded project. Where they could see, okay, the legislation on maternity in my country is very generous, in my country is not very generous. What do I do to make sure that I kind of catch up? So they had this type of discussion. And we developed together, we helped organizations develop action plans, and we actually provided technical assistance for that. In some cases, certain initiatives are relatively straightforward, and this is, I think, a very good example of how you can be relatively straightforward, but because there is a very strong commitment at top level of taking a decision, we want to recruit more women, we do it, and that's it. When you're talking about structural change and change in other parts of the organization, it can become more complex. In one institution, just to give one example, we worked on the human resource management system. We rebuilt the way in which the competencies and job descriptions are built in a way that was more comprehensive of the gender dimension. In that particular case, I can mention that because it's public, it's the Italian Institute for Nuclear Physics. They tended to evaluate positively only the very, very technical aspects of nuclear physics. But in reality, there are many other elements in scientific research that are very important in terms of management and soft skills. So we did a participatory process engaging a number of focus groups in different laboratories, and we rebuilt the grid for evaluation in a way that was really bringing out also certain values that were hidden, one of them being equality and diversity that before was not even considered. This will create the basis for the evaluation of staff. So performance evaluation, and eventually for hiring. Being a public sector institution, we have now, it becomes very difficult because there is an issue of rediscussing the collective agreement in that compartment. In a private sector, it would be much easier, of course. So this is just to give an example of what we have done.
Thank you very much.
I'll try to answer your question first. You mentioned that the Norwegian system is already so well prepared for that the female-male ratio is well balanced. So of course when we saw our numbers back in 2009, it was a very mature project. It really needed to be taken care of. So of course that helped us being in that situation where the focus is so strong on getting the balance right. It was very helpful for us to start this project and to get the commitment that we needed. And your question with the background and the different subjects that the Prepare project models, we try to recruit people, students, and from a wide spectrum of natural sciences subjects. And we see that within biology and pharmacy and those types of subjects, there are more girls. So we have looked for them in physics, in the traditional mathematics, and also within programming, because we would like them to share their experience and their way to why did I get interested in physics, and what is my view as being maybe a 22-year-old woman. What will I do with my physics when I graduate, and what is my plan, my career plan? So we think just by addressing those subjects very specifically, and by giving the pupils in the schools the opportunity to talk to them and listen to them and see that this girl, she's not much older than myself, and she's talking about physics in a way that I find really interesting, and in a new way, a way I haven't heard from maybe the school system yet. So we think that is the essence of how we can stimulate the pupils to choose these subjects.
Pronto, e só mais uma? Ok, vocês sabem. Só mais uma pergunta, pronto. Eu sou muito bem mandada, só mais uma.
Yes, I have a question for Simula. As a research private institution, I would like to know if you go through, if you are subject of external evaluation, yes, and if your policies in gender equality are included and appreciated in this evaluation process or not. Thank you.
Yes, we are subject to regular evaluations, and we are evaluated by an international committee every 5 years. So we are currently just in that phase because we're now preparing a self-assessment that's going to be submitted to this international committee. In addition to that, we have a very strong system for when we apply for funding through the Horizon 2020, for example, or also the national system that we have in Norway. It is always very clear that you have to put in a segment of your application that counts for the female-male ratio within your project setup. And that's very important, because if you have no active thoughts around how to get the gender balance right within your project, you probably won't get as high score as if you could make that. And just a little anecdote, if I have the time, because a professor at Simula, a colleague of mine, he was invited by, I think it was the Portuguese Research Council, to be an evaluator for a Horizon 2020 project. And he said to me that he was surprised to see that those questions that we always have to answer about the gender balance within the project that you want funding for, those questions weren't there. So the project weren't asked to specifically talk about how they were planning to count for the gender balance within the project. So I think all these things helps to stimulate everyone to start thinking about it and to be aware of the importance.